I sat at Miranda's gleaming marble dining table, my fingers wrapped around a crystal wine glass that probably cost more than my monthly grocery budget, and watched my sister hold court like she was accepting an Oscar instead of hosting Thanksgiving dinner. The November sun streamed through her floor-to-ceiling windows in Greenwich, Connecticut, casting everything in that golden hour glow that made her professionally decorated home look like it belonged in Architectural Digest, which it had. Twice. And so I told the managing partner, Miranda was saying, her perfectly manicured hand gesturing with her own wine glass, that if they wanted someone who could bring in clients of that caliber, they needed to make me senior partner. Not next year, not under consideration. Now, she paused for effect, her audience of 12 hanging on every word. And you know what he said. What did he say, Aunt Miranda? Her daughter Sophia asked on cue, her private school uniform replaced by a cashmere dress that matched her mother's. He said, "Consider it done, Ms. Hartwell." Miranda smiled triumphantly. "Well, Mrs. Montgomery now, but I kept Hartwell for professional purposes. The name carries weight." Our mother, Patricia, beamed from her position at Miranda's right hand. "We're so proud of you, sweetheart. Senior partner at 35. That's extraordinary." The youngest senior partner in the firm's history, Miranda's husband James added, raising his glass. "To my brilliant wife." Everyone toasted. I raised my glass too, because that's what you do. I smiled because that's what's expected. And I stayed quiet because that's what I've always done. "Elena dear, you're being awfully quiet," my mother said, finally acknowledging my presence at the far end of the table. "How's your little nonprofit doing?" Little, that word had followed me my entire life. Miranda's achievements were always grand, spectacular, impressive. Mine were little, sweet, cute. When Miranda made law review at Yale, I got a "that's nice, dear" for graduating summa cum laude from UConn. When she bought her first BMW, my decision to keep driving my 2004 Honda Civic was met with concerned looks and offers of help if I needed it. "It's going well," I said simply. "We housed 15 families this month." "That's wonderful," my father said, though I could tell from his tone he didn't really understand what that meant. George Hartwell had spent 40 years in commercial real estate development. Housing people was something you did for profit, not purpose. 15 families, Miranda repeated, with that particular inflection that made it sound simultaneously impressive and inadequate. In a month, James's company launched 15 new store locations this quarter. It's amazing how different our worlds are, isn't it? There it was, the first subtle knife. Miranda had gotten very good at this over the years. The art of the comparison disguised as observation, the put-down wrapped in a compliment, the reminder of who mattered more wrapped in a bow of sisterly affection. "Very different," I agreed, taking a sip of wine. "The thing about being underestimated your whole life is that you get used to it. You learn to find comfort in the shadows, safety in being overlooked." While Miranda had always needed to be the center of attention, I'd found freedom in the periphery. Nobody bothers you when they don't think you matter. Nobody questions you when they've already decided you're not a threat. Although, Miranda continued, warming to her theme, "I have to say, Elena, I do worry about you sometimes. That studio apartment in New Haven, is it even in a safe neighborhood?" "It's fine, Miranda." "And that car? Didn't you have that car in college?" "It runs well, I maintain it properly." "But wouldn't you like something newer, more reliable? I worry about you breaking down on some highway at night, all alone." She turned to our mother. "Mom, don't you worry about that." Our mother frowned. "I do actually, Elena, if you need help with a down payment." "I don't need help," I said quietly. "I'm fine." Miranda's younger son, Tyler, who was 11 and had apparently been given permission to join the adult conversation, piped up. "Aunt Elena, why do you shop at thrift stores?" "Mom says you could afford better clothes, if you budgeted properly." The table went silent. Even for Miranda, that was a bridge too far, and she had the grace to look embarrassed. "Tyler, that's not, I didn't mean it like that." But the damage was done, and honestly, it wasn't even the worst of what I'd heard over the years. At last year's Thanksgiving, Miranda had suggested I was single because I didn't make an effort with my appearance. At Christmas, she'd asked if my job provided adequate health insurance, as if I were one illness away from bankruptcy. At Easter, She'd offered to connect me with a financial planner who specialized in helping people on limited incomes. Each time I'd smiled, nodded, changed the subject. Because here's what Miranda didn't know: I wasn't poor, I wasn't struggling, I wasn't one financial emergency away from disaster, I was rich. Not Miranda rich, with the showy house and the luxury cars and the designer everything, but genuinely, substantially, comfortably wealthy. Wealthy enough that I could have bought her house twice over and still had money left for groceries. Wealthy enough that I'd been quietly funding my parents' retirement and my nieces' and nephews' futures. Wealthy enough that my little nonprofit had become a national model for sustainable housing solutions, with me at the helm of a foundation board that controlled tens of millions in assets. But I'd never told them, any of them. Because 5 years ago, when the Riverside Foundation had approached me about joining their board and revealed the compensation package that would come with it, I'd made a choice. I'd grown up watching Miranda chase validation, watching my parents shower her with praise for every visible achievement, watching the family dynamics revolve around who could display the most impressive success. And I'd decided I didn't want that life. I wanted to do work that mattered, with money that served a purpose beyond proving my worth. So I'd kept my studio apartment. I'd kept my old car. I'd kept shopping at thrift stores and cooking at home and living the same modest life I'd always lived. And I'd taken that money, my salary, my board compensation, my speaking fees, my book royalties, and I'd used it to actually help people. Quietly, privately, without fanfare. The thing about silence is that people confuse it with absence. They assume that because you don't announce your accomplishments, you don't have any. They mistake humility for inadequacy. I think we're ready for dessert, Miranda said, breaking the awkward silence that had followed Tyler's question. James, help me in the kitchen. As they disappeared, my mother reached over and patted my hand. Elena, sweetheart, you know we love you, right? We're proud of your work, even if we don't always understand it. I know, Mom. And if you ever need anything, financially, I mean, you know you can ask. Your father and I do okay. We could help. My father nodded, though I knew their retirement savings were modest. They'd helped Miranda with her law school loans, helped with her first house down payment, helped with the grandkids' activities. They'd given what they could because Miranda had always asked, always needed, always made her needs known. I'd never asked for anything. I appreciate that, I said, but I'm really okay. My Aunt Caroline, my father's sister, who'd been quiet most of the evening, spoke up. Leave the girl alone, Patricia. Some people don't measure their worth in dollar signs. Elena's doing good work. That matters. Of course it matters, my mother said quickly. I just want to make sure she's taken care of. Miranda returned with an elaborate pumpkin cheesecake, each slice already plated with artistic drizzles of caramel. Okay, everyone, before we eat dessert, James and I have an announcement. Here we go, I thought. As you all know, Mom and Dad's 40th anniversary is coming up in January. Miranda smiled at our parents. And we wanted to do something really special to celebrate. So, she paused dramatically. We're contributing $15,000 toward an anniversary gift. We think you should take that European river cruise you've always talked about. The deluxe package, with the balcony suite and the wine country excursions. Our mother gasped, Miranda, that's too much. Nonsense, you've given us everything. This is our way of giving back. She looked around the table, basking in the admiration. And we're hoping everyone will want to contribute what they can to make this really special. Various relatives murmured their agreement, pledging amounts. My Uncle Robert offered 1,000. Aunt Caroline suggested 500. Cousins chipped in with smaller amounts. Then Miranda's eyes landed on me. Elena, she said, and there was something in her voice, something sharp, something that had been building all evening. I know 15,000 is probably out of your range. That's totally fine. We don't expect you to contribute equally. You never really contribute anyway. The words hung in the air. Around the table, people shifted uncomfortably. My mother's smile faltered. My father frowned. Even James looked like he wanted to be anywhere else. Not to family celebrations, Miranda continued, and I could hear the whine in her voice now, the resentment she usually kept wrapped in prettier words. Not to Mom and Dad's retirement fund. You just drift along doing your little charity thing, helping strangers while your own family wonders if you're okay, if you can pay your bills, if you're going to end up one of your own clients someday. Miranda, James said quietly, warningly, but she wasn't done. I'm sorry, but someone needs to say it. We've all been tiptoeing around this for years. Alina, you're 32 years old. You live in a studio apartment. You drive a car that's old enough to vote. You wear other people's discarded clothes. And while that's your choice, it's not fair to expect the rest of us to carry the financial burden of this family while you play Mother Teresa. The silence that followed was deafening. I could hear the antique clock on Miranda's mantel ticking. Someone's fork clinked against their plate. Outside, a car drove past. I looked at my sister, really looked at her. At the desperation in her eyes that had nothing to do with money, and everything to do with needing to be seen as the successful one, the important one, the one who mattered. I looked at my parents, uncomfortable but not defending me, because they'd never quite known what to do with their quiet daughter. I looked at my nieces and nephews, absorbing every word of this lesson about what made someone valuable. And I made a decision. Slowly, carefully, I reached down to my worn canvas messenger bag, the one Miranda had once offered to replace with something more professional, and pulled out a folder. A simple manila folder, the kind you can buy at any office supply store for pennies. You're right, Miranda, I said quietly. We should talk about contributions. I stood up and walked to where my parents sat, placing the folder in front of my mother. This is for you and Dad, for your anniversary, open it. My mother's hands shook slightly as she opened the folder. I watched her eyes scan the first page, watched them widen, watched her hand fly to her mouth. What is it, Patricia? My father asked. She couldn't speak. She just handed him the document. It was a property deed. For a 3-bedroom house in Scottsdale, Arizona. The retirement community my parents had talked about for years, but could never afford. The house they'd visited last summer and fallen in love with the mountain views and the golf course access, and the community center where my father could finally take up pottery and my mother could join a book club. The house that cost. My father stared at the deed like it was written in a foreign language. Alina, this can't be real. It's real, Dad, it's yours. The closing is scheduled for December 15th. You can move in whenever you want. But how did you? My mother couldn't finish the sentence. Keep reading, I said gently. The next document was a statement from a trust account. 4 separate educational trusts, one for each of my nieces and nephews. Sophia, Tyler, Marcus, and little Emma. Each funded with $62,500, totaling $250,000. Enough to cover 4 years at any state university or contribute significantly to private school if that's what they chose. You did this. Miranda's voice was barely a whisper. She'd come around the table to look over our mother's shoulder. You set up college funds for my kids. For all our kids, I corrected. Family is family. The last item in the folder was a letter on official city letterhead. A commendation from the mayor of New Haven, recognizing my nonprofit's work in housing over 400 families in the past 5 years. But more than that, it was an announcement that the Riverside Foundation had chosen our housing model as a template for a national program, with me serving as the lead director. That the foundation's board had voted to expand our budget to $30 million. That I'd been asked to speak at the White House about sustainable housing solutions. That my little nonprofit was changing the way America thought about homelessness. My mother was crying now, full tears streaming down her face. My father sat with his hand over his mouth, the deed still clutched in his other hand. Around the table, my relatives were silent, trying to process what they were seeing. Miranda just stared at me. I don't understand, she said. You live in a studio, you drive that car, you shop at Goodwill. I do, I agreed. Because I choose to. Because every dollar I don't spend on things I don't need is a dollar I can spend on things that matter. On housing families. On funding scholarships. On making sure Mom and Dad can retire somewhere beautiful. On giving my nieces and nephews opportunities. I walked back to my seat and sat down, my hands folded calmly in my lap. 5 years ago, the Riverside Foundation offered me a position on their board. It comes with a salary of $185,000 a year, plus benefits. I also get paid for speaking engagements, usually around $15,000 per event, and I do about 10 a year. Last year, I published a book about innovative housing solutions. It's required reading in most social work graduate programs now. The royalties are modest but steady. You're making over $300,000 a year. My father said, his voice stunned. Give or take, some years more depending on grants and consulting fees, but I live on about $45,000 of it, the rest. I gestured to the folder. The rest goes to work that matters. Miranda sank into her chair, her face pale. Why didn't you tell us? Because it was never about telling you, I said simply. It was about doing it. Because I watched you chase validation your whole life, Miranda, and it never seemed to make you happy. You got the promotions and the house and the husband and the kids, and you're still looking around the room trying to prove you're enough. Still comparing, still competing. That's not fair, she whispered. Maybe not, but it's true. I softened my voice because despite everything, she was still my sister. I'm not saying this to hurt you. I'm saying it because I need you to understand something. Contribution isn't always visible. Worth isn't measured in what you display. And family isn't about who gives the most impressive gifts. My mother had stood up and come around the table. She wrapped her arms around me, holding tight. Oh, Alina, sweetheart, we've been so blind. You weren't blind, Mom. You just saw what I let you see. But why, my father's voice broke. Why let us think you were struggling? Why let us worry? Because I wasn't struggling and there was nothing to worry about, and because I took a breath. Because I needed to know that I could be valued for who I am, not what I have. I needed to know that my work mattered to me, even if no one else noticed. I needed to build a life that felt meaningful, not impressive. Tyler, bless him, asked the question Sophia, older and more perceptive, was looking at me differently now. Mom always said you weren't ambitious, but you are, aren't you, just differently. Very differently, I agreed. Your mom wants to be senior partner. I want to end family homelessness. Neither goal is better than the other, they're just different. But Miranda was shaking her head, tears streaming down her face now. No, no, Alina, what I did was better because I did it for the right reasons. I worked hard, I earned my success. You hid yours, you let us judge you, you let us think that I was less than you. I finished gently. I know, I let you think that because I didn't need you to think anything else. I didn't need validation from this table to know my worth. The words landed hard. Miranda stood abruptly, her chair scraping against the expensive hardwood floor. I need a moment. She disappeared into her perfect kitchen, and I could hear her crying behind the closed door. James looked at me helplessly. She's been under a lot of pressure. The partnership, the kids' schools, maintaining all of this. He gestured around the showcase home. It's exhausting, trying to keep up. I know, I said. And I did. I'd watched Miranda exhaust herself for years, running a race that had no finish line, chasing a goalpost that kept moving. But that's not my responsibility to fix James. It's hers. Aunt Caroline raised her glass to me. Well, I'll be damned. The quiet one was the smart one all along. Not smarter, I corrected, just different. Miranda is brilliant at what she does. I'm just brilliant at something else. My mother was still holding my hand, tears still falling. The house in Scottsdale, Alina, it's too much. It's not too much, it's exactly right. You and Dad have worked hard your whole lives. You deserve to retire somewhere beautiful. And I can afford to make that happen, so why wouldn't I? But we never gave you anything like this, my father protested. We helped Miranda with law school with her down payment. We never. You gave me the freedom to find my own path, I interrupted. You never pushed me to be something I wasn't. That's worth more than money. It wasn't entirely true. They definitely favored Miranda, definitely praised her achievements more loudly, definitely centered family gatherings around her success. But it was true enough, and it was what they needed to hear. Miranda returned, her makeup repaired, her composure mostly restored. She stood behind her chair, hands gripping the back of it. I owe you an apology, she said, her voice tight. What I said about you not contributing, about drifting along, that was cruel and unfair and untrue. Apology accepted. But I also, she paused, searching for words, I also need you to understand how hard this is for me. I've spent my whole life trying to be the successful daughter, trying to make Mom and Dad proud, trying to prove that I was worth something, and you were just being worth something quietly without anyone noticing. without needing anyone to notice. I needed me to notice, I said. That was enough. But how? The question burst out of her, raw and desperate. How did you stop caring what we thought? How did you stop needing our approval? I considered the question carefully. I didn't stop caring what you thought. I stopped letting what you thought define who I was. There's a difference. I love you, Miranda. I love this family. But I couldn't build my life around your expectations, and mom and dad's disappointments, and everyone's assumptions. I had to build it around what felt true to me, even if that meant letting us underestimate you. Especially then. Because being underestimated is liberating. Nobody expects anything from you, so you're free to exceed expectations in ways that matter to you, not them. Sophia spoke up again, her young voice thoughtful. Is that why you dress the way you do, and drive that car, to keep people from expecting things? Partly, I admitted, but also because I genuinely don't care about those things. That car gets me where I need to go. These clothes keep me warm, everything else feels like decoration, pretty maybe but not necessary. But don't you want people to respect you? Tyler asked. Of course. But I want them to respect me for my work, for my character, for how I treat people. Not for what I own or wear or drive. Respect built on possessions is rented, not earned. My father was reading through the documents again, shaking his head in wonder. 400 families, he murmured. You've housed 400 families. How did we not know this? Because I didn't tell you. Because the work was never about recognition. It was about results. But the mayor's letter, my mother said. The White House invitation. Alina, you're nationally recognized in your field. In my field, yes. But I'm not household name famous, and I don't want to be. I want to do work that matters, get paid fairly for it, and use the resources I have to create change. Everything else is noise. Miranda had sat back down, her shoulders slumped. I feel like I don't know you at all. You know me, I said gently. You've just been looking at what I don't have instead of who I am. That's fair, she whispered. That's completely fair. James had moved to stand behind his wife's chair, his hands on her shoulders. Miranda's been worried about you for years, he said quietly. Genuinely worried, wondering if you were okay, if you needed help. It came from a place of love, even if it didn't always sound like it. I know, I said, and I meant it. And I appreciate the concern, but I need you both to trust that I can take care of myself. That I have been taking care of myself. That the life I've built, even if it looks different from yours, is exactly the life I want. My mother was still holding the deed, running her fingers over the embossed lettering. Scottsdale, she said softly, we can really retire there. You can retire wherever you want, Mom. But yes, that house is yours, fully paid off. Property taxes are covered for the next 5 years through a trust I set up. All you have to do is say yes. My father stood and pulled me into a hug, his arms tight around me. I'm sorry, he whispered into my hair. I'm so sorry we didn't see you, really see you. You see me now, I said. That's what matters. When he released me, he turned to the rest of the table. I think we all owe Alina an apology. We made assumptions, we judged, we compared, and we completely missed the incredible woman she's become. Murmurs of agreement around the table. My cousins looked embarrassed. My aunt looked proud. My nieces and nephews looked at me with new eyes, as if I'd suddenly transformed into someone different, when I'd been this person all along. Miranda was staring at the trust documents for her children. You didn't have to do this, she said. After everything I've said, everything I've implied about you, you still did this for my kids. They're my nieces and nephews, they're family. And family takes care of family, even when family isn't always kind. I paused, especially then. She broke down again, really sobbing this time. I've been so awful to you. You've been insecure, I corrected. There's a difference. You've been fighting for validation so hard that you couldn't see James was looking at me with something like awe. The foundation board, the speaking engagements, the book, why didn't you ever mention any of this? Because it wasn't relevant to our relationship. When I'm here, I'm just Alina. Miranda's sister, Patricia and George's daughter, Tyler and Sophia and Marcus and Emma's aunt. I'm not Director Hartwell or Board Member Hartwell or anything else. I'm just me. But those things are part of you, my mother protested. They're part of what I do. They're not who I am. Who I am is someone who believes housing is a human right, who thinks every child deserves a stable home, who values compassion over consumption. The titles and positions are just tools to accomplish those goals. Sophia was looking at the mayor's letter again. You're going to the White House. In January, there's a task force on affordable housing. They want input from people doing ground-level work. That's incredible, Aunt Alina. It's an honor, I agreed. But the real honor is getting to do this work every day, getting to see families move into stable housing, getting to watch kids do their homework at their own kitchen table for the first time. That's the work that matters. Miranda had composed herself again. She stood and walked around the table to where I sat. For a moment, we just looked at each other, two sisters who'd spent 32 years living in parallel, never quite connecting. Then she hugged me. Really hugged me, not the air kiss society hugs she usually gave, but a real, tight, desperate embrace. I'm sorry, she whispered. For everything. For diminishing your work, for judging your choices, for needing to be superior to feel secure. I'm sorry for being so insecure that I couldn't celebrate your success. I'm sorry for being a terrible sister. You're not terrible, I said into her shoulder. You're human, we're all human. When she pulled back, her eyes were red but clear. Will you tell me about your work, really tell me? I want to understand what you do, why it matters to you. I'd like that. And will you forgive me for being an arrogant ass who thought success only looked one way? I smiled, already forgiven. The dinner resumed, but the energy had completely changed. Instead of Miranda's accomplishments taking center stage, people asked me questions about the housing model we'd developed, about the families we'd served, about the book I'd written, about what it was like to be invited to the White House. And I answered, simply and honestly, without false modesty but also without pride, because the work had never been about me. It had been about the 400 families sleeping safely tonight because someone had seen their worth, their potential, their humanity. Later, after dessert had been served and coffee had been poured, my father raised his glass. I want to make a toast, he said. To both my daughters. To Miranda, who has worked incredibly hard to build an impressive career and provide beautifully for her family. And to Alina, who has worked just as hard to build a meaningful life and contribute to the world in ways we're only beginning to understand. You've both made us proud. Just differently. Everyone raised their glasses. I caught Miranda's eye across the table, and she smiled at me, a real smile without the edge of competition or comparison. As the evening wound down and people started gathering their things to leave, my mother pulled me aside. The house in Scottsdale, she said. Alina, it's the most generous gift anyone has ever given us. But I need to know, can you actually afford this? I don't want you sacrificing your future for our retirement. Mom, I can afford it, easily, I promise. And you're truly happy, living the way you do. I thought about my studio apartment, with its secondhand furniture and thrift store art and view of a brick wall. I thought about my old Honda Civic, with its temperamental radio and worn seats and history of reliable service. I thought about my closet full of consignment store finds, mixed with the occasional new piece bought intentionally and worn until it fell apart. I thought about the freedom of not caring what people thought, the peace of knowing I had enough. The joy of using my resources to create change instead of display. I'm happy, I said. Genuinely, authentically happy, and that's worth more than any house or car or designer wardrobe. She hugged me again. We should have seen it sooner. Should have valued you for who you were, not compared you to who we thought you should be. You're seeing it now, that's what matters. As I drove home that night in my old Honda, the heat working perfectly despite the car's age, I thought about the expression on Miranda's face when she'd seen the trust funds for her children. The shock, the shame, the realization that her little sister, her struggling, unsuccessful, drifting little sister, had been carrying more weight than anyone knew. But more than that, I thought about the conversation we'd had as I was leaving. Miranda had walked me to my car, her designer coat wrapped tight against the November chill. Can I ask you something? She'd said, of course. Do you resent us? For all the years of dismissing you, of treating your work like a hobby, of assuming you needed help. I'd considered the question carefully. No, I'd said finally. Because your assumptions about me said more about you than they did about me. They showed me what you valued, what scared you, what you needed to believe about the world to feel secure in it. And I have compassion for that. We're all just trying to feel worthy. But you found a way to feel worthy without external validation, she'd said. How? By defining worth for myself, instead of letting other people define it for me. By deciding that my value wasn't tied to what I owned or earned or displayed, but to who I was, and what I contributed when no one was watching. She'd nodded slowly. I want to learn that to be that, but I don't know if I can. I've spent so long building my identity around achievement and recognition. Then start small, I'd suggested. Do one thing this week that matters to you that no one else will ever know about. See how it feels. Like what? Whatever calls to you, volunteer somewhere, help someone anonymously, learn something new just for the joy of learning it, not to add to your resume. Do something that serves you, not your image. She'd smiled, a little sadly. You make it sound so simple. It's not simple. It's hard work, figuring out who you are when you strip away what other people think, but it's worth it. Now, pulling into my apartment complex, I felt that familiar sense of peace that had eluded me for so many years when I tried to be what everyone expected. The peace of living within my values, the peace of contribution without recognition, the peace of enough. My studio apartment welcomed me with its familiar simplicity. I made a cup of tea in my thrift store mug, changed into my comfortable pajamas, and settled onto my secondhand couch with a book about innovative housing solutions in Scandinavia. Tomorrow, I'd go back to work. Back to client meetings and grant applications, and the endless, beautiful challenge of housing one more family, helping one more person. But tonight, I sat in my small apartment, surrounded by things that cost little but meant much, and felt rich in all the ways that mattered. My phone buzzed. A text from Miranda, thank you, for the trust funds, for the grace. For showing me there's more than one way to be successful. Love you, little sister. I smiled and typed back, love you too. Different paths, same destination, figuring out what makes life meaningful. Her response came quickly. When you meet with the mayor again, can I come? I'd like to see your work, really see it. I'd like that, I wrote back. And I meant it. Because family isn't about being perfect or agreeing on everything or valuing the same things. It's about showing up, making room for different ways of being, and choosing connection over comparison. It had taken 32 years and a Thanksgiving confrontation for my family to see past their assumptions. 32 years of being underestimated, dismissed, worried over, and pitied. 32 years of quiet contribution that no one noticed. But in the end, the silence had served its purpose. It had given me space to build a life that mattered to me. It had taught me that worth isn't measured in applause or recognition or family validation. It had shown me that the most powerful form of success is the kind that doesn't need an audience. I'd spent years being the silent contributor, the overlooked sister, the family member everyone worried about but no one really saw. And in that invisibility, I'd found freedom. I'd built something real and meaningful and mine. Now they saw me, really saw me, and that was good. But I'd been fine all along, seen or unseen, because I'd seen myself. And I'd liked what I saw. That night, I slept soundly in my studio apartment, in my second-hand bed, under my thrift store quilt, as wealthy as I'd ever been and would ever need to be. Not because of the money in my accounts, or the deed to my parents' retirement home, or the trust funds for my nieces and nephews, but because I'd figured out the secret that had eluded my sister for so long. That true wealth isn't what you display, it's what you contribute. It's not what others see in you, it's what you see in yourself. And I was rich beyond measure.